And in the end, we got that benefit shut off and won that battle and continued the movement before it was cool and popular to get public employee salaries and benefits in line with what's going on in the private sector. And then we continue on down the list. But I want to just touch on two other quick things and then close and take your comments and questions. And these are the big things that the country's facing. One is we got to get this private economy moving, not the government economy. Barack Obama is confused and thinks that the way forward for our economy is to grow the government sector, and he's looking to take things that are in the private sector and move them into government. I want to take things that are in government and move them into the private sector. So I said in recent days, let's look at a Google test. So if you can find a good or a service on Google and it's being provided in the private sector, that's probably not something that the government needs to be providing. Obviously, you got to use common sense when it comes to things like the military and the like, but as a practical matter, if some entrepreneur, if somebody in the private sector is providing that good and service, and government doesn't need to be doing it. And we should be looking to move things out of from government sector into the private sector, but we've got to get the private economy moving. And I meet with people who want to start and grow jobs all across this country every day, all week, and they all say the same thing. Governor, when you become president, you got to make the load lighter, not heavier. You got to get the government off my back. And some talk about taxes, some talk about regulation, some talk about energy costs, some talk about permitting, some talk about litigation, some talk about the cost of insurance, and on down the list. But the message is the same everywhere across the country, every day, everywhere. If you want to grow jobs, you got to do things to encourage the job providers, not discourage them. And that's not what's happening with this president. We have a president who thinks that the best way forward is to add more to government, have government take over more of the private sector. So I went to his former employer, the University of Chicago, gave a big speech a couple weeks ago on what it's going to take to grow not the government economy, but the private economy. And the basic elements of it were this. Number one, cut the business tax rate by more than half. Number two, simplify our tax code so it's flatter and simpler and fairer and more pro-growth. Take the 6 tax brackets and get them down to 2. Eliminate the taxes on capital gains and dividends and interest and the estate taxes. Make the tax burdens for individuals and companies more investment-oriented, more growth-oriented, simpler, flatter, fairer. Those are the kinds of things that would get the economy moving. We also talked about the need to have a strong dollar and to get the federal government and the Federal Reserve and the Treasury to move back towards a strong dollar policy. We also can't have a successful country as part of this economic growth package if we don't have more American energy. We talked about the importance, I talk about the importance of moving everything we can to an American pro-growth, pro-energy, drill within the United States energy policy as it relates to ANWR, as it relates to this tremendous game-changing natural gas opportunity that we have. We need to do everything we reasonably can to get more American energy to market. We're going to get the prices to stabilize and go down when we create more supply. And then lastly, we need to have healthcare reform, but it needs to be real, market-based healthcare reform. What Barack Obama did is take the problem and drag it into Washington, D.C. and do what Democrats always do. And that's create a top-down command and control system, have options for people and freedom be limited to one or a few, have it be regulated, tax people more to pay for it. It is a preposterous system. It is going to make healthcare more expensive, not less expensive. It is going to take away our freedom, not give us more freedom. It's going to make the problem worse, not better. We should repeal Obamacare in its entirety. And we should make sure that we do that as soon as possible. And then the second and last thing is this. We got to get the spending under control. It's not just reckless. It's not just irresponsible. It's immoral. This is a country that is drowning in debt. We're passing on a debt burden to our children and our grandchildren that is unimaginable. If we don't take bold and decisive and strong action now, it is going to be almost mathematically impossible to get this country's finances back on track in the not too distant future. We have a tremendous opportunity to do that if we have a Republican Congress and a Republican president. Now again, everybody's going to say they're the one who can do that. When we kicked off this campaign in Iowa, in Des Moines a few weeks ago, I said we're going to have to look the American people in the eye and each other in the eye and tell the truth about what it's really going to take to fix this problem. And there can be no more sacred cows. And so it's difficult to say, but I said, look, in Iowa, we're going to have to tell the truth. We're going to have to tell the truth in other places around the country. So that means we're going to have to say we're going to phase out the ethanol subsidies. It's not that we're against renewable energy, but we're going broke as a country. We can't afford it anymore. Now that's not going to help me in my campaign necessarily in Iowa, but it's the truth. And I can't come down here and tell you that we're going to tell the hard truths and put real solutions to the real problems on the table and pretend like we can afford everything going forward. We can't. And then we went to Florida, talked to seniors and the next generation about what it's really going to take to fix Social Security. And then we went to Wall Street and told the Wall Street types to get their snout out of the trough because they got it in there as deep and as bad as anybody. And it's time to get them off the carve-outs and the bailouts and the handouts and the special deals. And then we went to Washington, D.C. and spoke to the federal employee unions and said, you can't be getting better pay and benefits than the people who are paying the bill. And so we're going to freeze what you got until it's aligned with how things work in the private sector. Those are the kinds of things and more that we need to do this. Everybody's going to say they can, but I did it in Minnesota. I had the first government shutdown in 150 years in my state. I set a record for vetoes in Minnesota. I took more money out of the budget using executive authority in my 8 years as governor than all the other governors combined in Minnesota's history. And so when the question comes, who really in this field is going to do the tough things, has the fortitude, the leadership, the skills, the experience, the judgment to not only talk about this stuff, but to get it done, I'm your candidate. And I need your help. We've got the Ames straw poll coming up on August 13th. I think you're all well familiar with the event. And so we want to earn your support between now and that day. We want to encourage you to come and support our campaign. We'll get you any and all the information we can to make sure you can make an informed decision. We want to invite you on board this team. We're going to do well at that straw poll, and we're going to win the Iowa caucuses. And I know and trust and believe the people of Iowa will make a good decision, not just about the Iowa caucuses, but for our party, for the conservative movement, for a nominee who can not only win the nomination, but win the presidency. So going forward, this won't be easy. But America has overcome every challenge it's ever had. And so if prosperity were easy, everybody around the world would be prosperous. And if security were easy, everybody around the world would be secure. And if freedom were easy, everybody around the world would be free. But they're not. We are in the United States of America. And we should always remember that the brilliance of this country does not reside within our bureaucracies or our government. We went around this room and asked people to share their American story about what made them successful, some of the lessons you've learned. I think we'd hear inspiring stories about family. I think we'd hear inspiring stories about faith. I think we'd hear great stories about neighborhood and community and people helping each other in the moments of life challenges. I think we'd hear great stories about people starting something, having a dream, building it, having success, maybe getting knocked back and rebuilding it again. I think we'd hear great stories about people pulling alongside at key moments of your life and giving you a pat on the back and some encouragement in tough moments. But I think we'd hear very few stories about how government transformed you or some bureaucrat transformed you. The point of all that is the brilliance of this country is not in our bureaucracy. It's in our people. It's in the spirit of the American people. And the freedom that we have and the freedom that we enjoy, the freedom to worship, the freedom to associate, the freedom to create, the freedom to dream, the freedom to take risks, the freedom to start new things, the freedom to do new things is fundamentally different than most other cultures around the world and throughout time. And those freedoms don't just get challenged potentially by external forces, they get challenged by a government that creeps into our lives every day at the state or local or federal level and says, we're going to make that next increment of American entrepreneurialism or creativity more difficult, more heavy, more expensive, slower, more discouraging. And when they do that, they not only grow their budgets, they do something else. They weigh down and they diminish the American spirit. You know that. We see it. And it's time for us to rise up and take this country back on a better course and a better direction. I've got the experience and the leadership and skills to do this, not just talk about it, but to get it done. So let's start that process officially on August 13th at the Ames Straw Poll. Thank you for coming today, and I look forward to the questions that you will start.